As it is now Pentecost, I'm going to do a reading from the first Arcanum of Nina Roudnikova's Solar Path of the Tarot. The first Arcanum, the Magician, Aleph. This is the divine essence, the male principle, the nature that determines. Its numeric designation is 1. Its astrological correspondence is the Sun. In the symbolic picture of the Great Pyramid of Cheops, the first Arcanum is depicted as follows. A human figure, with his right hand raised and his left hand lowered, stands in front of a cube. In his right hand he holds a rod, a wand. In front of him, on a cube stone, stands a bowl, a sword, and a coin. On his forehead is a gold hoop, around his waist a gold belt. This figure, symbolizing the subjective consciousness, is crowned and girdled with the light of the One, the source of love, and the spirit that dominates the elements of the manifested world. The world in its essence represents unity. The inner essence of things is always the same and identical to itself. The one spirit that pervades all forms and every phenomenon of the world is only the expression of this spirit in form. Every phenomenon of the world is a manifestation of one of its creative possibilities, so the great ocean of the unknowable spirit is omnipresent, all-pervading, and underlies the whole world. It is the root of all things, and since our mind is one of the forms of its manifestation, it cannot know its own essence, which transcends the spirit. All forms and names are created by the mind, and define some form. The same one, which fills all forms, has no form itself, and therefore no name. No name can be applied to it. To somehow define it, formless and faceless, he is called the Absolute, the Deity, the Ein Sof, the unattainable, or simply that, in Vedanta terminology. It fills all the forms of the world, and at the same time it is infinitely greater than their totality. He knows himself in all great and small creatures, and at the same time surpasses them all in his essence. He is everything in everything, and everything is in him, and yet no infinity of worlds will exhaust his inner possibilities. He is manifested everywhere, and his inner essence moves him. The external entity moves the universe, and it is everywhere manifested as a single force. The universe is love. Love in its manifestation is the desire for unity. Love is essentially the affirmation of a unity that does not exist anywhere in the manifestation. Everything in the world is born of love, abides in love, and expresses love. But often, behind the endless, innumerable forms of love, we do not see its single and all-encompassing essence. The spirit love is what expresses all the infinite varieties of the worlds. But for its manifestation, love splits the unity of the incomprehensible ocean of spirit into two parts, the subject and the object, which is expressed in their mutual desire for a radical unification with each other. All the best aspirations are ways of acquiring this love. Unselfishness, selflessness, self-detachment are only the affirmation of the unity of love, the blurring of the boundaries between I and you, and the way to unite them. Therefore, one cannot speak of love if one does not realize in the heart these three messengers of God: unselfishness, selflessness, self-denial, are to be found in the heart, and love cannot be understood if there is self-restraint within the framework of egoism. The path to God, that is, to the external unity of all, to the ocean of love, lies through the stages of their manifestation. Therefore, subjective development, which is so necessary for the acquisition of spiritual values and spiritual knowledge, is essentially a path from egoism to the ever-expanding stages of unselfishness, selflessness, and self-denial, up to the accommodation in the spiritual world. The subject of spiritual consciousness, and in the heart of all beings and all creatures of the manifested universe. This subject, the bearer of divine love, who is everywhere, radiating from the centre to the periphery and embracing all infinity, is expressed in the first Arcanum. The first principle of the bestowal path is the recognition of the spiritual unity of the universe and the affirmation of the potential to create out of oneself a subject of radiating, all-encompassing, and creative love. The title of the Arcanum is Divine Essence. The masculine principle is a formative principle in nature, which in its essence is eternally creating itself. The subjective consciousness is merged with the ocean of the Absolute Spirit, but in its manifestation it embraces a part of this boundless ocean as the object of its self-manifestation, by putting the seal of the potential of the possibilities contained in it. This subjective consciousness carries in itself, in its potential, all the possibilities of the subsequently manifested cosmos, the knowledge of all its forms, mastery of all laws and forces that unfold in its power spirals. This subjective consciousness, all-encompassing and all-conscious in its depth, which is aware of everything and feels itself in everything, is the synthesis of all the manifestations of great and small consciousnesses. In the fullness of its potential, it carries within itself as a possibility the entire universe, and the potency of the affirmation of being, which has been poured out of the spirit by the conscious totality of the worlds, its self-consciousness, that is, a form of consciousness in which the subject is absorbed. It is recognized by the divine subject as a form of its manifestation. The consciousness, when applied to the universe, is called God, that is, a subject that carries within itself and radiates from its inner essence the great and small images and creatures of the world. Self-consciousness, as applied to man, is that form of human consciousness in which everything that has a name or a form is rejected or dissolved in the eternal radiance of the spirit, which is fundamentally one with God. This is the form of consciousness in which the boundaries between I and you are blurred, and everything is absorbed by the self-radiating love by the Spirit. The first principle of manifestation in man is the very essence of our soul, our inner self, our subject, eternally immersed in itself, never changing in all the changes of its shells, the infinite Spirit, always remaining the same, regardless of any changes, no matter what transformations of our consciousness. The consciousness of oneself in all its transformations, in all its states, in all the aspects of one's personality, in all the ideals of one's soul, here is self-consciousness. It never changes, it never acts, for its possibilities are effectively brought to life by the instruments of its manifestation through the heart, mind, and pain. It is only a constant witness of the changes that are taking place in the spiritual, mental, psychic, and physical shells that hide it. We are separated from it by all the stages of the plane of consciousness, that is, the knowledge and possession of all the manifestations of the ego in the cosmos. And at the same time, it is the inner being of our soul. But to achieve it, we must discard everything that is not it, we must know everything and own everything that we then have, and then let us reject it, because ignorance and lack of mastery can make us accept some passing stage of consciousness as the reality of our inner self, and this mistake can have serious consequences. Although the truth lies in the realm of subjective consciousness, all the objectivity that lies between us, it must be known and transcended in order to reach it in all its purity. In order to understand God in himself, there is a method of negating everything that he is not. But it must be emphasized that in order to really master negation, we must know what we reject. Only under these conditions can we merge the sensations of our I with our real spiritual essence. The method of negation is the method of not identifying consciousness with anything that is not essentially it. Know thyself, and thou shalt know the whole world, says the ancient wisdom inscribed above the temple of initiation. Know thyself as all-present, all-knowing, all-blessed, all-holy. The eternal unity of the Spirit, and rule over all that is not your I. Do not identify your consciousness with the changing objective forms in which it is constantly clothed, that is, perceive all its manifestations as roles played in the great mystery of life. It does not matter what this role is, because it manifests itself in it. One of the potentials of our Great Spirit. What does it matter what the last role is? It will also be a manifestation of the divine self-realization of self-consciousness. At its root, our spiritual self, our inner essence, is eternally fused with the divine essence, the reality manifested in the universe. Therefore, all the beings of the world and all its phenomena are connected together by a common presence in the divine essence, which means that the real connection between us is actually the connection of the manifested spirit. Our mind tries to connect the phenomena of the world with the horizontal lines of the law of causality, but in reality, everything in the world is connected by radii going from the periphery to the center, and from the center to the next radius. Through the Spirit, through God, there is a connection between the beings of the world. Therefore, the feeling of connection with the beings of the world, with those near and far, is actually their sense of their own and their divine essence. And this connection, which exists through God, is called love in the manifested world. Therefore, every manifestation of love is divine, because it establishes a connection that passes through God, and therefore it is impossible not to love your neighbor without love for God, which can be expressed in the search for truth, the desire for spirit, for self-improvement, etc. A single spiritual essence of the world is impossible, because when we break the connection with the highest, that is, with the center, we break the connection at the periphery, and then we are separated from each other. A friend with all the illusory shells that stand as an obstacle to mutual understanding and for love. Theoretically, if a person denies God and the Spirit, but his heart is not dead for love, then by this he shows that he is subconsciously affirms and recognizes the Spirit. But of course, a theoretical negation, creating false ideas, in the end can distort the consciousness in such a way that it will lose all connection with the spiritual world, and then it will dry up and die for the feeling of love, and will also lose connection with all its loved ones. Thus, the beings who have lost their eye become shadows, bringing death and decay into everything. The principle of unity can be achieved only if the unity of consciousness is realized in all life manifestations, that is, under the condition of the verticality of consciousness, when all the manifestations of the planes are grouped around the axis of the set ideal and are brought into hierarchical order. The nature of this order depends on the potential of self-consciousness, just as the establishment of order of a person depends on the potential of the divine subject manifested in it. The world is like this because such are the potentials of the spirit manifested in it, and such are the personal characteristics of people. The world must strictly correspond to the potentials of our spiritual essence unfolding in it. It is impossible to deny the order of the universe. The experience accumulated over thousands of years is constantly being filled with great consciousnesses detached from their small personalities, who have firmly established in themselves the four planes through which the divine consciousness manifests in the universe. According to this law of the four, which is the basis of every form, the inner potential of this divine spirit is developed. In the symbolic picture, these four stages of the spirit's manifestation are represented by the rod, the cup, the sword, and the coin. The rod is held by the Aleph itself, for it symbolizes the principle of the spiritual manifestation itself, and it's upon a cubic stone, which is again symbolic of the four. Here, three objects lie in front of him, as submissive instruments of his positive appearance. In man, in a small cosmos, these four planes of consciousness are poured out into the following forms: spiritual life and creation of spiritual syntheses, corresponding to the realm of Absolute, religious and mental searching for the path and building their ideals upon it, that is, the formulation of the world of ideas, corresponding to the world of Bria, psychic and energetic manifestations of the search for the ideal and service to it, the Yetzirah, and physical actions that focus spiritual and ideological principles accordingly in the environment of our planet Earth, which is the realm of Asiya. In short, in man, his spirit manifests itself. We are born in a chaos of forms subject to all kinds of changes. Our worldview and world feeling, that is, the area of our psychic life, the area of feeling, must correspond to our worldview, and we should not look in any random likes and dislikes. All subconscious intense experiences must be illuminated by a ray of understanding, either introduced into the general worldview or transformed accordingly. All our actions must be driven by the service of the ideal and guided by our worldview, rather than being the result of a random feeling, impulse, or a chaotic reaction to the impact of objectivity. The planes, in brief, are spiritual or soul, mental intelligence, area of the senses astral, and physical etheric body. Therefore, in the construction of inner unity, it is necessary to begin with the establishment of the subjective goal of the search with a subjective living ideal corresponding to the cosmic reality, and not to the fantastic ideas of the intellect detached from the cosmos. Only such a positive person is truly ready to manifest his or her spiritual personality, an entity, a truly cosmic employee, who can develop his or her potential into blazing suns, into driving forces, into real achievements, through the continuous work of self-discovery in the four planes of coordinated consciousness. Only such a person can really put the imprint of their spirit upon the environment and determine its order, just as God forms the cosmic environment and establishes its unshakable order. It is necessary to develop a unitary worldview, which is reduced to a worldview based on the basic principles of this ideal, so that in all this worldview, the knowledge was harmoniously merged with the spiritual access, but at the same time, it is impossible to close the circle of the possibility of new acquisitions. I think I'm missing a page. Just a minute. I'm going to have to read off the computer because my printout didn't work completely, so here's the remainder of the Arcanum. The growth of consciousness is directed towards infinity, and therefore our ideological intellectual wealth should not be located in a closed circle, but in an upward spiral of new self-disclosures and objective accumulations. Only the axis of the spiral, the spiritual backbone, must be worked out and remain unchanged and immobile, so as not to be destroyed. In nature, on our planet, these four planes of manifestation of the universal spirit would have to manifest in the four realms of nature. Man is called to exist in the ideological and psychic forms of spiritual creation, Bria and Yetzirah, and the animal kingdom is called to realize it in the plane of the earthly intellect, which processes the matter of the earth. The four realms of nature are the accumulations of psychic and physical solar energies. The mineral kingdom is intended to be a single cohesive foundation of all this creativity, fixing it in the realized material forms of the earth. Therefore, every planet is such, down to its material forms, which are the tasks of the manifested potential of the spirit of its representatives. But the human consciousness, called to the realization of spiritual principles, has partially severed its connection with the spirit that feeds it. It fails to realize the identification of its I with its earthly manifestation and earthly tasks, and, therefore, the consciousness burned out and plunged into the flows of the earthly energy manifestation, and self-consciousness was replaced by egoism. The severing of the spiritual connection with the cosmic spirit caused the weakening of the ties between the immortal soul of man and his earthly personality. His earthly personality ceased to be plastic and flexible, obeying the dictates instead. It submitted to the material flow of the earth. Its shells were roughened, and its physical body was too dense and imperfect. The breaking of the line of consciousness between the immortal soul and its instrument, the personality, made the personality mortal and caused the need for the soul to manifest in many persons by the law of reincarnation. The great creative mind of humanity, which is a part of the cosmic mind, has been replaced in the severed earthly personality by the instrument of its partial manifestation, the earthly intellect or reason. The difference between the mind and the understanding is that the mind is connected with the creative principle of the universe and is the creative principle in man, giving rise into living effective ideas, living images, represented by such a complete reality as the forms generated by the cosmic spirit. The understanding is one of the organs of the mind, created by it for understanding the earthly situation of its manifestation, the earthly facts. Detached from the greater cosmic mind, the individual human mind is able to truly assess the earthly situation and falls into numerous errors. It cannot see the wood for the trees. The feeling in the detached personality of a human being, that is, the direct perception of the essence of things, has turned into impulses from unconscious instincts that are weakly aware of the principle of connection, and into an impulse of reactions to earthly objectivity, that is, passions. The will of man is his constant striving toward the goal, the divine essence. His intense creative impulse towards the realization of spiritual values turned into his egoism, into broken chaotic desires for the possession of earthly objects and achievements. In fact, man, from his royal position as a companion of God, descended to the stage intended for the animals, and, by this fall, caused the animals to fall. The decline of consciousness into the animal world, usurping its intellectual task and leaving it only a chaotic manifestation of distorted mental impulses, instincts, and passions. The vegetable kingdom was protected by the higher powers from the negative influence of the lower man, and if this had not been done by the spirits, the leaves of creativity in the solar system, the earthlings, would have ceased to exist long ago. The plant kingdom remained the only complete and conscious cosmic collaborator which did not break the connection with the world's psychic energy and constantly transformed it into the generative flow of life force, in the juices that are nourishing and healing, thus taking care of people and animals even in their fall, healing them from the consequences of mental breakdowns and diseases. The growing vegetative kingdom produces fruits and grains in such abundance that they would be enough to feed all the creatures on earth if they turned to this only legitimate way of maintaining their lives. The mineral kingdom was thickened and coarsened by the breakdown of humanity, and its materials ceased to obey the direct formulation of thought. Instead, it requires the application of physical work for its transformation. Thought creation, on the other hand, has an extremely weak effect on it, and the identification of its results requires a long time and direct fixation. I'm just checking the camera. Thought creation, on the other hand, has an extremely weak effect on it, and the identification of its results requires a long time and direct fixation of the thought in physical form, as well as a long effort and tension which is necessary even for a disciplined person. The principle of selflessness is recommended for achieving one's own spiritual essence and freeing consciousness from false self-identifications. To carry out self-denial and selflessness in your daily life, and to lead the eye not to the self-worth that fills the consciousness, but to the way of solving the spiritual task in the work of each day, and to perceive everything as a conscientious performance of the task. Whatever we did not, we must remember that all our work is aimed at identifying one of the possibilities. the universal spirit for the realization of the universal good to the extent that our personality deserves it. To develop such a life attitude, it is recommended you take the following steps. Separate your physical body from yourself. Analyze this state and understand that the analyzer and the analyzer are not the same, and that the analyzer in relation to the analyzed is a subject separate from the object, independent of it. Do not identify your I with your feelings, so you will master the secret of self-control. Concentrate on thoughts, be able to analyze them. Understand that again, the subject of their analysis is dominating them. Dominating the headlands leads to the possibility of conscious thought creation. Apply the same analysis to the area of your spiritual but religious life. Understand that the ideal you set is only the revelation of your higher self. And by ceasing to identify yourself, even with a spiritual ideal, you will achieve self-consciousness, self-immersion in the immortal ocean of your own spirit, merged with the spirit of the universe, and eternally affirming the principal world unity. The mantra for the first Arcanum is I am, which means I am eternal, immortal, and free. Nothing can destroy me. I can't disappear anywhere. Nothing can harm me. In all the changes of life, I am. The I is the true cause and witness of all changes and all transformations of consciousness.